So, what if Trump's new tariffs weren't just another chaotic plot twist in the saga of global economics, but actually a strategic move? Yeah, I know, it sounds like something a YouTube conspiracy theorist would say, but let's take a deep breath. Alright, and let's unpack this, because understanding what tariffs are supposed to do is the first step to seeing how they affect you. Even if you just want to buy a tail or a pair of hand paws for your next fursuit, or just simply furry art. Hi everyone, this is Zyly the Fox. Welcome to... wow, another video hitting on politicians. Wow, Zyly, do you want to get into a blacklist? No, okay, sorry. If you want to watch my previous hot take on political issues, you can check my last video on Russia and furries. But as for now, today's America's turn. So, what's a tariff? A tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. When a government slaps a tariff on products coming from other countries, it does two things. First of all, it makes foreign products more expensive for local consumers. And at the same time, it gives an advantage to domestic producers who don't pay such said tariff. So, in theory, and believe me when I say in theory, a tariff helps local industries grow by making imported competition more expensive. You know, the America First thingy and all the jazz. Which, believe me, generally doesn't work. I mean, I come from a country who is living experience of that. But, well, here's the twist. In a globalized economy where supply chains span continents, raising tariffs is like throwing a wrench into a machine that needs every gear to be turning smoothly. Let's say the United States imports machinery parts from China or Canada to build a product locally. Slapping a tariff on those imports doesn't just punish China or Canada. It raises the cost of production that such that product inside the US has. This also happens here in Argentina with products that are, assembled in Tierra del Fuego, or the land of fire, whose parts come from other countries, alright? So if you raise taxes on imports on those products, of course, the manufacturing of that or the assembly of that will consequently be more expensive. That's exactly the thesis of this video. So ironically, even local businesses end up paying more. Now, in Trump's case, the tariffs are part of a bigger, more complex maneuver, and I want to address this in a more serious way. Right now, the United States economy is carrying a mountain of national debt. To prevent that debt from causing inflation chaos, the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates high, meaning loans and credits are more expensive, which slows spending and growth at the same time. So what happens when you add a tariff into this mix? Well, of course, prices of goods go up because imported stuff is now taxed. This provokes an inflation sensation, which at the first part of its implementation will provoke an inflation spike. As a consequence, consumers get cautious, businesses start pulling back, and the economy all in all slows down. And this is key. When that slowdown starts looking scary enough, the Federal Reserve gets pressure to lower interest rates to stimulate growth again, which in turn makes it easier for the government to service its debts, because it can now borrow money at lower rates again. So, that's a very clever move. But unfortunately, it will unconditionally punish the customers. That kind of strategy might look smart on paper, but in the real world, well, let me tell you that people feel it. You, particularly, will feel it.
Trump's tariffs have crippled the stock market, spooked international investors, and pushed the US towards recession.
Especially if you are part of a niche, creative subculture that depends on international shipping, regular traveling to conventions, of course, let's talk about, or handmade goods like a fursuit might be. So this isn't just about Wall Street gains. It's about you, your next convention, your next commission, maybe even your next fursuit plans. Why not? Basically, your wallets, my dear friend. And that's exactly what we're going to break down in this video. Let's start with the basics. It's very common for furries in the first world to travel around to conventions and have the full globetrotter experience. We listen, but we don't judge. So congratulations, you guessed it, our first stop is airfare. Let's talk about one of the pillars of our global furry culture, which is, of course, conventions. So from Anthrocon in Pittsburgh to Eurofurence in Berlin, these events are more than just people meeting. They are cultural exchanges since we get to know each other's worlds and traditions. Business hubs, do I need to elaborate on what the dealer's den is? And of course, conventions also represent a spiritual home for thousands of furries since they are generally significant event for those who really look forward to meeting their long-distance friends in a big furry party. But here's the thing, the new tariffs are not just hitting products, they are indirectly hitting services too. As I said at the beginning, a service needs to be supplied, and if these supplies suffer the impact of a tax, the final price is not absorbed by any company. I mean, who would lose money trying to make money? It is the customer who ends up paying for that gap, of course. In this same line, aviation fuel, aircraft parts, and maintenance inputs that airlines depend on will consequently impact the final price of a ticket that each airline offers to the public. It hurts to say this, but airlines facing rising costs aren't going to eat the difference. They will pass that cost on to travelers. So there you go. According to Business Insider, ticket prices could rise by up to 24%, especially for international routes. That's a massive hit, but now how does this translate into US traveling to conventions? Let's focus on this at the beginning. Domestic travel within the United States will, of course, be less affected. It might even get cheaper as airlines prioritize local routes to attract budget-conscious flyers.
International travel to the United States is expected to slide by 5% this year.
As more and more Americans are worried about the situation and may decide to stay home.
This will result in more demand over local conventions, of course. However, international travel to the United States will be heavily affected. If you are a furry from Latin America, from Europe, from Asia, hoping to go to, say, BLFC, Anthrocon, or even MFF, let me tell you that your flight will be a little more expensive. Let's make a small example. Supposing we have a flight called X. This round-trip flight cost allegedly $1,000. Pretty cheap, right? Thanks to this incrementation in tariffs, your flight is now $1,250. But why? It might not be a significant rise, but it surely weighs down in your wallet. That difference, though small, it might have accounted for your allowance in the dealer's den maybe, or in your con badge. And mind you, this example does not contemplate local taxes from the country of origin where you're going. For example, if you're traveling from Argentina, my country, and it hurts to say, has a tax that adds almost 60% to international flights, which makes it a little, difficult. But how about the United States? Even if you still feel like you can purchase your flights or that the cost of the flight is not as significant, your trip just got a little higher, which is something no one likes at the end of the day, right? Of course, this not only brings consequences in the economic aspects of conventions, but of course, it has something more. As a humanist myself, I tend to look at the social aspect that sometimes are changed and triggered off by economic switches, and I could note down 3 main consequences of this possible market's impediment. In the United States alone, at least, convention attendance will likely become more regionalized, which means fewer international attendees going, of course. This sadly will bring about less cultural diversity at conventions. Businesses will have more local customers, but the significant role of international travelers will be a big hit for local furry vendors, which results in the last consequence, missing business opportunities for artists and fursuit makers alone, whose interest is targeting a global audience. And let me tell you, as someone who's been in this fandom for the last 15 years and who has seen these events, these furry conventions and, let's say, entrepreneurships grow internationally over the years, it's a little heartbreaking to see potential gates close, not gonna lie. And as these potential gates close, it's obvious that we need to talk about entrepreneurships like fursuit making. This one is a little obvious, but I didn't want to let it flop since it's the one that hurts the most, at least to me, for the furry community. Fursuit making plays an important role in this community, and now, at first glance, this might seem like a very made in the USA business, but you picture a maker sitting in the workshop, gluing parts and stitching smiles into toony muzzles. But surprise, fursuit making is a global puzzle and a source of income to countless furries, not only in the United States but worldwide as well. And one of the key pieces of this business is fabric, most of which comes from abroad, of course. A lot of high-quality fox fur is imported from Canada, Korea, and even Europe, even if it's distributed through US-based retailers. When those import costs go up due to a tariff increase, guess who is going to pay in the end? Well, of course you, the buyer. Of course, makers can adjust and find their most beneficial option. As someone who has dealt with many offers and different prices in an overtaxed economy as the Argentinian one can be, you adapt, you adjust, and you overcome. Yeah, it stinks, but you need to stand up for your business, and you will need to work with makers whose fabrics are brought from countries with lower tariff rates, like Canada, whose price will be fixed so far in at 25% to fashion and fabric. So with this small detail that we have, we can crunch some numbers to put this into a clear picture for you. Let's imagine a fursuit maker who charges $3,000 for a full body suit. Yeah, pretty cheap, but it's an example. Out of that, let's say $800 goes to raw materials, including fur. If 70% of that fur is imported from Canada, and now that specific import has a 25% import tax, that adds $140 to material costs. So after overhead and adjusted labor costs, the final fursuit price may now be $3,250 or even more. That doesn't sound too bad, right? I mean, it stings to pay more when you were used to a base price, but here's an issue that you'd like to look into. Makers operate on thin profit margins, which means that their jobs are a little underpaid for the effort they put into their work. Or at least that I can say from the message that I received from some makers I had the chance to talk to. As a consequence, this inflationary effect that tariffs will cost at the early stage will definitely pile up on the price of the fursuit maker basic supplies to even start working, such as glue, foam, shipping supplies, and even electricity bills. And don't even get me started in shipping costs to send off their creation. This basically means that all in all, a basic generic maker will need to raise prices just to break even. And following my example, then like a basic custom fursuit whose starting price was $3,000 now could be $3,500 or even $4,000, especially for premium materials. Now picture that with real prices, like more expensive of course, right? The risk? Oof, let me tell you, it's a big one. This might create a class barrier. And here I'm talking about the risk of, the tariffs influencing the price of fursuits. Let me clarify that, alright? So, as I was saying, this might create a class barrier. High-end suits become luxury items for wealthier buyers, while, of course, small makers may lose clients or undercharge just to stay competitive, leading to burnouts and eventually collapse. This is something that is actually happening here in Argentina with both fursuit makers and also artists, since they tend to charge less in the local market so that local furries can afford a basic piece of art or even a fursuit. But to be honest, it sucks. It sucks to undercharge for a job that it takes both valuable time and your own skills, so it's not fair, neither for you nor for the client. So this brings along the consequence that I wanted to talk about last place. Last but definitely not least, we should talk about furry artists, like digital illustrators, badge designers, merch vendors, and basically everyone who's keeping the fandom visually alive on social media. Compared to fursuit makers, they seem less vulnerable to tariffs. After all, they work digitally, right? No imports, no shipments, just vibes and styluses, alright? But it's not that simple. Nothing is that simple in this world, dude. Yes. Most furry artists don't deal with raw imports, but their payment systems, platforms, and customer bases absolutely do. Take PayPal for instance. or Stripe. These platforms are international fintech companies, and many are facing financial turbulence because of the new economic climate created by tariffs. According to CNBC, stocks in these companies are dipping, and sanction fees for foreign payments could rise as a result. How can this affect the market for art trading and furry merch? Well, let's make an example. Just in the United States of America, your PayPal or Stripe processing fee for an international payment might now take a larger cut, or even charge a cross-border fee. What does this mean? Alright, imagine you're an artist and you want to charge a $70 headshot commission to someone in Brazil. To cover that rising fees in PayPal, you might be forced to upgrade that price to $80. It is a significant rise, but a needed one, since as consumer goods in the United States become more expensive, like food, like gas, like housing, even artists working from home will need to charge more just to survive. That's not greed, alright? It's survival. But that is just the United States. What about furry artists from other countries, like here in Argentina or in Chile, who use these virtual wallets? Are they safe? Due to currency instability and strict exchange controls, artists can't just withdraw their PayPal earnings directly into their bank at a fair rate. The government enforces a heavily undervalued official exchange rate for United States dollars, as it's happening here in Argentina with the different types of dollar, like blue dollar, like official dollar, like dollar for imports, for exports, many dollars is, alright? So artists get paid in dollars but lose up to half the value when cashing out in pesos, unless they use workarounds. So our original price of $100 commission minus $12 of PayPal fees ends up with an $88, which then should be exchanged at the official rating exchange from Argentina, which in most cases it's around 1,100 pesos. But the official real value of the dollar is 1,400 pesos, leaving us with a difference of 96,000 pesos opposed to 140,000 pesos, leaving artists with a gap of 44,000 pesos, which they miss. These methods already eat into artists' income, and they are all dependent on fintech platforms staying relatively stable. Now imagine what happens if United States-based fintechs like PayPal, Stripe, or even Ko-Fi, as we mentioned before, starts adjusting their international policies due to shifting regulations to protect US capital. Even a small change, like increased international fees or restrictions on Latinoamerican withdrawals, could swipe out profit margins for artists in Argentina, in Chile, or in Brazil. This can either force artists to raise prices for international clients just to survive, or worse yet, if these platforms start geo-blocking features or limiting USD balances, artists might be forced to back into using less secure or even black market solutions, increasing risks, and of course stress over so much triangulation. Yes, sometimes here in Argentina, to withdraw dollars, you have to go to the black markets and get everything in cash. So in sum, while nothing has really changed yet in this area, and God forbid it does, these tariffs and the broader shift towards US economic isolationism put pressure on financial systems. That pressure trickles down, and in regions like Latin America, where artists already navigate tight ropes just to get paid, even a minor policy shift could be devastating. This is about economic fragility, and for many Latin American furries, believe me, that fragility is lived daily reality. So here's the bottom line, folks. Trump's tariffs might be a calculated economic strategy to nudge the Federal Reserve, manage debt, and bring manufacturing back to the United States. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. And for the furry fandom, a community that thrives on global connections, the first wave of impact is almost entirely negative. As an Argentinian furry who's lived through protectionism policies, let me tell you, yeah, they can help in the short term, but they also tend to distort the markets. This is something I understand from my Argentinian perspective, where our politicians have experienced these issues and moved forward to a more updated market. Protectionism is too old-fashioned. It was applied here in the 90s, it failed, and I do hope that the United States of America does indeed succeed in its plan, not because I like Trump or his policies, but because I genuinely hope they don't crash the country because of my friends who live there and who have to put up with all this and what it will bring along. On a closing note, what can you do to survive this? Well, let's take a word from someone who lived through 1 hyperinflation and 2 major economic crises in the span of 28 very beautiful years. We plan, we adapt, and we support our local artists and small makers. Oh my gosh, Argentina is a country that promises your dreams will come true, but then it crashes them down. Oh my gosh. If you're a small furry entrepreneur, don't panic, but do start looking into local suppliers, diversified platforms to help your payment methods if anything is to happen because of, fintech, and aim for community building strategies that don't rely on international attendance or sales, sad though it may sound. Because while these policies might not last forever, market volatility is real, and navigating it wisely is now part of surviving in the furry fandom that's coming up in this 2025. I hope you guys are safe. Don't take my video for sensationalist. I'm just trying to inform, and this is my perspective on how it could impact in the furry fandom. I really hope this ends up really being completely untrue, but this is the little bit that I can give from my perspective. We're in this together, Fluffballs. Stay sharp, and see you all in the next one.